3 spine-chilling true stories of sinister watching, revelations of haunted secrets unveiled. In the quiet town of Crestwood, Nebraska, shadows move through the night, and they watch. Julia, a recently widowed mother, feels that gaze every moment she walks past the abandoned schoolhouse across the street. It looms there, its weathered walls whispering stories of a past long buried, one that mirrors her own unraveling reality. Julia brushes off the flickering lights that dance inside, trying to shake the shivers crawling up her spine. But a gnawing sensation clings to her. She can't escape the feeling that someone, or something, is always following her, watching her. As nights grow colder, the air thickens with a deep, unsettling fear. Crestwood is filled with rumors now. A touch of paranoia settles over the town. People are disappearing and neighbors exchange side glances like loaded guns. With every dollar earned at the diner, Julia fights to keep the light on in her small home for her 10-year-old son, Ethan. And yet, each casual encounter seems to prick her nerves more. Always smiling, Harold, the neighbor next door, offers help with a sincerity that twists her stomach. His eyes, glinting with a blend of kindness and something darker, send chills skating down her spine. What does he want, really? Then the eerie messages started arriving on her phone. Claims of secrets about her late husband's past, shrouded in dark whispers, slithered into her consciousness. What truths were being hidden beneath layers of dust? She dives into local folklore, uncovering the tale of a teacher who vanished from that very school decades ago. A ghost still roaming the alleys, they said, searching for something that needed saving. And now, it feels like that wretched spirit isn't the only one with a thirst for revelations. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. One cold night, fueled by a resolve she wasn't quite sure came from bravery or desperation, she confronted Harold. Preparing herself for a conversation, she emerged to find him standing in her yard, muttering to the shadows as if they were old friends. Julia's heart raced. The wind bit at her cheeks. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice tremulous with fear. Harold turned, a smile chilling to the bone, claiming he was simply doing his duty, protecting her. Protecting her? Her stomach churned as paranoia gripped every logical thought. Was he an angel, or had he become one of the monsters only whispered about in the dark? And then it happened. Clues led her deeper into connections neither had even imagined. The ghostly teacher wasn't the only mystery. Her family history threaded into the town's dark tapestry in ways she never wanted to fathom. Her heart raced with each uncovering truth, yet the shadows grew nearer, suffocating her tiny sanctuary. The flickering lights became an echo in her mind, a siren-esque call coming from the schoolyard. In that moment, she realized there would be no escape. Her own family's past intertwined with the malevolence she thought she was fleeing. As she stepped back from Harold's haunting gaze, the weight of the town's secrets pressed down on her, and the shadows whispered louder, beckoning with a chilling urgency. What truth had she stumbled upon? Would it consume her before dawn? Julia couldn't shake off the feeling of dread even after retreating inside her home. The walls felt as if they were closing in, suffused with the same shadowy secrets lingering outside. She turned off every light, leaving merely the glow of a candle flickering on the kitchen table. Ethan sat across from her, drawing. Clutching his crayons, he seemed blissfully unaware of the horrors encroaching around them. Yet, as Julia tucked a stray hair behind her ear, his soft gaze met hers with an uncomfortable familiarity of knowing more than he let on. "Mom," he whispered, letting the silence amplify the air heavy with tension. "Are we gonna be okay?" Her heart twisted. "Of course, sweetheart." Her voice trembled, betraying her. "It's just a crazy night." Outside, the wind howled, filling their home with an eerie sound, like whispers from the grave. Julia found herself instinctively glancing toward the window. There, beyond the glass, was the schoolhouse, its windows glowing with an otherworldly light. It beckoned, urging her to uncover what lay hidden within its creaking walls. With each passing moment, she felt the shadows move closer, no longer content to lurk just outside. Ethan dropped his crayons, looking alarmed. "Mom, do you see it?" She nodded, unable to find her breath. "It's just a trick of the light, Ethan." But deep down, she knew it wasn't. It felt alive. "Mom!" His voice rose in panic, pointing. "Someone's in there. Look!" Her stomach plummeted. Through the flicker of candlelight, she saw a figure emerge in the doorway of the schoolhouse, a silhouette way too familiar. Harold. Standing there, like a dark guardian ready to protect the malignancy that stirred within those walls. He raised a hand as if beckoning her to come closer. "Stay here, Ethan," she ordered, feeling a primal instinct surge through her. Run or confront whatever darkness awaited her? Her legs felt like lead, but fear sharpened her senses. She took a deep breath, snuffed the candle, and slinked toward the door, wholly unaware of the truth that simmered just beneath the surface of her life. As she stepped outside, an unnatural chill gripped her. The night swallowed all warmth. The ghostly light from the school flickered, terrifying and enchanting. Julia clenched her fists. Was she really going to confront Harold? "Are you coming out to play?" His voice tuned with a sinister mockery. "Play?" she echoed, maintaining the facade of bravery. "What are you talking about?" His smile widened, a crescent moon shadowed in darkness. "So many secrets, and you've only scratched the surface. You don't need to dig deeper. Your family's past is thrumming just beneath the ground you walk on." A rush of adrenaline surged through her. He knew something. She could feel the truth lurking at the edges of her sanity. "What do you mean? What do you know about my husband?" "Maybe it'd be better to learn from the whispers, Julia. They want to tell you. They want to be heard." Her heart thundered against the cage of her ribs as she recalled the tales of the ghostly teacher from the faded records. The missing children, the blood-soaked history that painted Crestwood in shades of nightmares. Before she could question him further, the schoolhouse door creaked open wider. The whispering became louder, inviting, thrilling, chilling. Shadows spilled from the threshold, wrapping around her feet, tugging at her. She felt the tug of her past wanting to be rekindled, and yet, the foreboding sense warned against stepping further. "Make your choice, Julia," Harold urged, his voice silky and dripping with something unholy. "What will you find within?" The choice loomed like the oppressive darkness, and she could hardly breathe. Just then, her phone buzzed in her pocket, an anonymous message. "They know what you seek. The truth is darker than you can imagine." Julia stood frozen, trapped between the malevolent invitation and a soul-twisting truth. She took a step toward the schoolhouse, but was the darkness truly ready to reveal itself? Would her family's anguish be the key to salvation, or the final lock on her doom? The air was thick with anticipation as Julia stared at the threshold of the schoolhouse, the shadows within pulsating like a beating heart. Her hand trembled as she clutched her phone, the chill of the unknown creeping over her skin. "What truth?" she muttered to herself, barely audible above the howling wind. The darkness answered with silence, which only amplified the dread coiling in her stomach. Ethan's soft whimper broke through the tension. She turned to see him standing at the door, eyes wide and brimming with confusion. "Mom, don't go!" His small voice echoed through the night, amplifying her inner turmoil. How could she protect him from whatever horror lay ahead? Located on the fringe of her courage, a fragile thread bound her to that accursed schoolhouse. "Just stay right here." Julia squeezed his shoulder, reminding herself to be the rock he needed. She guarded his trust like a fierce mother bear, hating the thought of distancing herself from him. In that moment, the cult of the shadows inside the schoolhouse beckoned even louder, drowning out her instincts to flee. With a deep breath, she faced the darkness again, stepping closer. The earth felt alive underneath her feet, as if it too was aware of the buried secrets waiting to emerge. Each step sent her heart racing, anxiety squeezing her chest harder than ever. She crossed the threshold, the schoolhouse door swinging shut behind her with a definitive thud, sealing her fate. Inside, the air was stale, carrying the aroma of decay. The flickering light illuminated dust motes, swirling like restless spirits. Old wooden desks lay strewn about, each telling a story of the children who once found refuge in the lessons within these walls. But now, those lessons felt tainted by an unseen malevolence that hung just out of sight. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling as she moved deeper into the room. Wisps of voices brushed against her ears, like whispers of lost time threading through her mind. Memories? Nightmares? Julia wasn't sure what they were, but the sense of being watched tightened its grip. "Are you coming to hear the stories?" Harold's voice filled space around her, smooth and oily like the wet pavement after a storm. She turned sharply, seeing him by the blackboard, a shadow among shadows. The room was alive with movement, walls tight with unspoken anguish. "Get away from me!" Panic laced her words, her breath quickening. She felt trapped in a recurring nightmare, the ghostly figures of children swirling around, frozen in time, their tiny hands reaching out as if begging for freedom. Julia Harold stepped closer, a menace cloaked in familiarity. "Your husband knows all of their names. He was part of it. A teacher, a keeper of the secrets. You need to understand." The darkness pressed in, making the walls feel like they were closing around her, suffocating her spirit. "What do you mean, part of it?" She stepped back, heart racing. The hidden truths of their lives began to intertwine with her reality, pulling her into an abyss where nothing made sense anymore. If Ethan were in danger, as if reading her mind, the whispering crescendoed into a terrifying chorus, rising in volume until a shriek echoed throughout the schoolhouse. Julia spun to see what had materialized from the depths of her fears. Ethan's voice cut through the chaos, calling her name, pulling her back. "Mom!" His frightened face peered in through the door, eyes filled with desperation. She sprinted toward the exit, yet it began sealing itself, the heavy wooden door closing slowly as if alive, twisted by the malevolence that permeated the air. "Ethan!" she yelled, panic clawing at her throat as she rattled against the door, its frame warped as if by time itself. With one last frantic push, she felt a surge of strength. Suddenly, she burst free, shattering through the darkness that had held her captive. She stumbled into the night, gasping for breath, the schoolhouse door slamming back into place behind her, shadows flickering like heartbeats. "Mom!" Ethan lunged to her side, his little arms wrapping around her waist, grounding her in the reality of his warmth. "It's okay, we're okay," she breathed, though the weight of dread still hung above her like a storm cloud ready to burst. She glanced back, hoping for some sign, but the schoolhouse stood ominously silent. Then the phone buzzed in her pocket again. Another message. She hesitated, heart pounding like a drum, and finally opened it. "The truth will come for you both. It's already begun." As she stared into the abyss of the schoolhouse's gaze, Julia now understood the web tightening around them. The answers she'd sought began to seem like guided bombs ready to explode, and she realized this was only the beginning of her understanding. What had she unleashed, and what further horrors awaited in the relentless pursuit of the truth hidden in their past? The chill of the night wrapped around Julia like a suffocating shroud. She could feel Ethan trembling beside her, his tiny frame pressed against her side. Her heart beat like a war drum, a constant reminder of the chaos they had just escaped. But the silence that followed their flight wasn't just stillness. It was an ominous pause, charged with a foreboding energy that made the hair on her arms stand on end. "Mom, what happened in there?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She knelt down, looking deep into his wide, terrified eyes. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. But we need to get away from here. We need to." Her words were cut short by another vibration from her phone. She fished it from her pocket, anxious to silence the persistent message that seemed to echo their growing dread. The screen flickered with a new notification, the stark words jumping out at her. "They're watching. You want to escape again." Julia's breath itched. It felt as if a shadow had wrapped around her throat, squeezing tighter with each passing second. "We need to move," she urged Ethan, gripping his hand tightly. They turned away from the schoolhouse, closing the door on the swirling horrors behind them, but the strain of that dark place lingered, refusing to let go. Walking quickly down the path that twisted through the overgrown grass, Julia couldn't shake the feeling of eyes boring into her back. She resisted the instinct to look over her shoulder, knowing that whatever was watching wouldn't show itself so easily. Still, her gut churned, and the aura of dread seemed to settle deeper within her bones, an inevitable confirmation that this wasn't over. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes caught her attention. Julia turned sharply, instinctively shielding Ethan behind her. A raccoon scuttled away, but her heart raced nonetheless. The wild animals had claimed this land, and they seemed more aware than she was. "Mom?" Ethan whispered, his voice trembling again. "We're okay," she repeated, though the assurance felt hollow. They continued hurrying toward the car parked further down the gravel road. Each step echoed in the silence of the night, a reminder of how utterly isolated they were. The schoolhouse loomed in the background, a hulking silhouette against the moonlight, silently judging their escape. But as they approached the car, Julia stopped dead. The trunk was slightly ajar. A frigid wave coursed through her veins. "Ethan, stay close," she ordered, fear threading through each word. She instinctively reached for her keys, her fingers trembling. Maybe it was just the wind, maybe it had blown open. But why did that feel so wrong? She leaned in closer, squinting through the darkness. Shadows danced inside her vehicle, and she could have sworn she saw something shift. A low moan emanated from the trunk, a sound mingled with a creaking as if it were struggling against a confinement. "Mom, what is it?" Ethan was trembling now, pulling at her jacket, his eyes growing wider with every passing second. She dared a step forward, her heart pounding against her chest as she clenched the car handle. A muffled voice slipped from the trunk, barely a whisper but unmistakably human. "Help please," that was all it took. Julia's instincts kicked into high gear. "Get back!" she shouted, pushing Ethan behind her as she wrenched open the trunk. What she found inside made her blood run cold. The contents were not what she expected. Wrapped in dark cloth was a small, tattered doll, its eyes glaring at her with a malevolence that pierced into her soul. The doll seemed to vibrate with the tension of dread, as if it could sense the fears surrounding them. Then there was a rush of wind, colder than before, swirling like a cyclone around her. Julia could hear whispers again, not only from the doll but from the shadows encasing them, a cacophony of voices rising and falling. "Mom!" Ethan shrieked, his small body pressed tightly against her. "Get in the car!" she yelled, panic lacing her voice. But as she turned to usher him, she saw the schoolhouse door swing open behind them. Shadows began pouring out, dark figures lapidifying before her very eyes, taking form in the moonlight. "Mom, please!" Ethan's voice trembled as he looked at the emerging silhouettes. In a heartbeat, they closed the distance between them. Julia felt the weight of her choices crushing her as reality slid sideways, and an unknown force pulled her deeper into chaos. She could feel their insidious whispers flooding her thoughts, dragging her into a void of terror. "What have we unleashed?" she whispered, desperate for an answer that felt perpetually just out of reach as the darkness wrapped around them, tightening its grasp. And just as suddenly as it all began, silence fell, the kind that felt suffocating and final. Was it the end? Or just another beginning of horrors yet to come? Julia's chest heaved as the darkness settled around them. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but the figures advancing from the schoolhouse painted her in place with fear. Black silhouettes, indistinct yet menacing, glided forward with an unnatural grace. Shadows twisted and writhed, whispering incoherent secrets that swirled in the cool night air, echoing a haunting chant. "Mom!" Ethan's tiny voice cut through the suffocating silence, panic etched on his face. "Stay close." Julia gripped his hand tighter, every sinew in her body taut like a drawn bowstring. Her heart raced, pounding out a frantic rhythm of terror. With a jolt of adrenaline, she yanked open the car's door. "Get in!" she cried. But as Ethan scrambled inside, she hesitated, her gaze drawn back to the advancing figures. They moved as if gliding above the ground, the very shadows appearing to extend from their forms. Just as she was about to follow, the doll she had found in the trunk, accursed thing, plummeted from the back seat to the gravel. It landed with a soft thud, The unsettling sound echoed as fiercely as a thunderclap in her chest. A chill gripped her stomach, instinct warning her that the arrival of the shadows was not arbitrary. Suddenly, one of the figures, the larger one, halted just outside the car's light. Its face was distorted, eyes burnt red like coals, burning with an ancient malice. An electric jolt shot through Julia. She felt nausea creeping, as if the very air were thickening against her lungs. She couldn't breathe. "Mom! Please!" Ethan's tremble was barely contained. The figure stepped into the beam of the car's headlights. A wave of stillness followed, and that voice, charming yet horrifying, sliced through the night. "You shouldn't have come here." It felt impossible to comprehend. Julia's heart thudded louder. She threw herself into the driver's seat and fumbled with the keys, her hands slick against the metal. A sound, urgent and shrill, sliced through her panic. Ethan gasped as he pointed outside, eyes wide with fright. "Mom! The doll! Look!" The doll had shifted, its mouth mirroring a grotesque smile, its beady eyes snapping back to life. But how could it move? Julia was frozen in disbelief. The whispers grew louder, drowning her mind in chaos. "Start the car!" she shouted. Urgency seeped into her voice, drowning her creeping fear. She twisted the key, and the engine growled to life. But the moment brought no relief. The shadows howled with a swirling wind, drawing closer, a fresh wave of dark energy flooding the vehicle. It felt like they were breathing in the night, thick and suffocating. Ethan yanked at her arm. "Drive, Mom! Please! And leave him?" Julia's voice broke. Uncertainty gnawed at her. Her instincts screamed to escape, and yet something held her hostage, an invisible thread tethering her to the nightmarish figures staring hungrily at her. In that moment, the shadows lunged. All at once, there was stillness, as if time condensed into a heartbeat. Julia slammed the accelerator, tires screeching against gravel, the figures distorting and flickering as the car bolted down the road. But as they sped away, a pulsing weight lingered in the air around them, a warning that the night was far from over. Was it just their escape, or had they torn the veil to something far darker? And then Julia's phone buzzed again, a foreboding jolt shaking her. Dropping the phone into her lap, she gasped at the notification. "You can't run from what you've awakened." As the chilling sensation wrapped around her, a voice whispered from the shadows in the back seat. "We're not done yet." Ethan looked back at the dark silhouette closing in as Julia's grip tightened on the wheel, fear creeping back in. What had they truly unleashed? The tires screamed against the asphalt as Julia drove, the landscape a streak of blurred shadows and moonlight. Her hands trembled on the wheel, and she could barely concentrate on the road. Panic swirled in her mind, drowning out all rational thought. Ethan was quiet now, his breathing fast, thick with terror. "Mom, are they still coming?" he finally whispered, eyes glued to the back window. Julia stole a glance into the rearview mirror but saw nothing. The engrooved darkness felt like a predator, waiting for them to slip. "I don't know, Ethan. Just hold on." The headlights carved a path through the night, but the gloom pressed in on them, heavy and relentless. Each gust of wind seemed to pull at the car, whispering threats, shaking her resolve. White-knuckled, Julia pressed down harder on the accelerator, desperation fueling her flight. But no matter how fast they went, it felt as if the shadows were right behind, wrapping around her, ready to snatch them away. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again, a cruel reminder of their plight. "We've been waiting," the notification read, and as she read the words, a sharp coldness spread throughout the car. Julia felt Ethan staring. "Mom?" He was terrified to ask, but she could already hear the question hanging in the air. "Don't look back, Ethan. Keep your eyes forward," she snapped, the sharpness of her voice surprising even herself. But they had already crossed the line, entered into something dark and ancient. And the doll, ethereal in the back seat, seemed to be at the heart of it all, its smile more sinister than ever. It was like it was feeding off their fear, a malevolent thing come to life. "Do you think—" Ethan started, then faltered. "Do you think it will hurt us?" Julia sighed, her heart sinking. "I don't know. But we have to find help." The words felt flimsy, fragile in the presence of looming terror. As they drove deeper into the rural night, the trees thickened around them, black giants swaying like beckoning giants under a phantom wind. Julia's mind raced. What was she supposed to do? She felt as if the very fabric of reality was fraying, and somewhere, the darkness danced, whispering promises of unspeakable horrors. Then the car jolted violently, tires hit something on the road, a groan of metal echoed as if warning them they were straying too close to the edge. Julia fought for control, but the steering went slack, and they veered off the road, crashing through the underbrush. "What happened?" Ethan cried, his anxiety soaring. "I don't know," Julia shouted, panic vibrating in her voice. She threw the gear into reverse, her heart hammering. But the ground underneath lurched, and the vehicle settled deeper into an unseen pit. Then came the whispers again, sharp and clear. "You shouldn't have left." Julia's breath hitched. "Did you hear that?" "What?" Ethan asked, eyes wide. Before she could answer, a sudden flash illuminated their surroundings. Darkness momentarily dispersed, revealing figures standing among the trees, their features twisted and grotesque, eyes aglow with a predatory hunger. "Get down!" Julia screamed, shielding Ethan with her body. The flashlight she had kept under the seat had slipped out, flickering to life. The beam caught the shadows, and for an instant she saw something scuttling across the ground, something small and horrifically familiar. The doll. It thudded against the windshield, closer now, its mouth opening wide in a silent scream. The sharp realization hit what they had unleashed was not just darkness. It was an entity, alive, and it wanted them back. As the figures lurched forward, Julia's heart raced with an overwhelming sense of dread. They were right here. The fight had only just begun. But in the back of her mind, another thought flickered like a candle's flame threatening to extinguish. What if the only way out is to go deeper in? As the shadows closed in, suffocating the air around them, Julia's grip on the steering wheel tightened. She had to make a choice, and fast. Would she face the nightmarish dark or succumb to it? "Mom," Ethan whispered, again pulling her from her thoughts. And as breathless chaos erupted outside their window, she could only think of one thing: how far would they truly have to go to be free? The ground shook beneath them as the figures closed in, rustling branches and snapping twigs echoing the predator's approach. Julia's heart hammered against her ribcage. She was suffocated by the weight of her choices. "Mom!" Ethan's voice was a plea wrapped in fear, a sound so raw it slashed through all the tension and brought her focus back. She peered through the windshield, the dim light casting an eerie glow on the distorted faces surrounding them. Their eyes shimmered like shards of glass, glistening with a hunger that chilled her to the bone. "Ethan, listen to me carefully," Julia said, urgency flooding her words. "We need to get out of here. We can't stay in the car." She fumbled for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Damn it! Panic threatened to swallow her whole. The figures moved closer, their forms shifting like shadows, twisted and meshed with the night. An unsettling sensation crawled over Julia's skin, prickling like icy fingers. She reached for the flashlight, gripping it tightly. "On the count of 3, we Mom!" Ethan's voice broke her concentration. A sudden pounding on the car roof made their world tilt, sending a jolt of terror through her limbs. The doll had returned to the front again, a macabre sentinel, its painted smile deranged under the feeble light. They were drawing attention, a sacrificial offering. Julia shoved to the side, unleashing the door, less an opening and more an invitation to the haunting chaos outside. "Run!" she shouted, and before she could think of consequences, she lunged into the unknown, pulling Ethan along. The night air was cold as they stumbled into the underbrush. Roots clawed at their feet, branches clawed at their skin. She felt Ethan's small hands slipping from her grip, and her heart plummeted. "Ethan! Stay close!" she yelled, voice slicing through the stillness. Something flickered to her right, a brief flash of movement. Julia turned, and there, standing just beyond the trees, was a figure. Tall, unnaturally pale, it seemed to shiver with malevolence, eyes wide and fixed on her. Disbelief turned her resolve to jelly. She turned to Ethan. He was staring at the thing, entranced with a horror she had never seen before. "Don't look at it!" she screamed. But the figure suddenly lurched forward, its mouth stretching impossibly wide. A veil of darkness rolled off it, exposing the very depths of despair, and in that moment, Julia's scream died in her throat. "Mom!" Ethan whimpered, tears flowing down his cheeks, his voice barely a whisper against the cacophony of panic. "Run!" Julia shouted again, pulling at Ethan, forcing him into the woods. They stumbled deeper, grass clutching at their ankles as they fled from the malevolence behind them. Every breath screamed of fear, every pulse begged for escape. In their flight, they could hear whispers again, always just out of reach, sinister and knowing. "You left us." It echoed through the trees like a cackling laugh. Julia clutched Ethan tighter, desperately searching for something, any sign of safety. But even the darkness was shifting, swirling with promises of retribution. The trees twisted and turned, morphing into grotesque forms. It was as if the very forest was alive, conspiring against them. Then, through the haze of terror, a figure emerged, an old man with gentle eyes and a torn flannel shirt, an unexpected beam of warmth. "This way!" he beckoned, stretching out a weathered hand. Doubt flickered in Julia's mind, but instinct screamed for salvation. As they approached him, the shadows shifted, whispering more urgently. "Don't trust him." The words clawed at her brain while the comforting visage offered a glimmer of hope. "Mom, wait!" Ethan tugged at her sleeve, unsure. Could she risk it? As the darkness roared behind them, inching closer with every heartbeat, Julia made her choice. "Trust me," she whispered to Ethan, fixing her gaze on the old man. But as they moved toward him, a spine-tingling realization washed over her. What if he was not their savior, but part of the darkness too? The chilling laughter grew louder, echoing all around them, tightening the grip of fear. The nightmare was shifting, twisting into something more horrifying than they could imagine. And just then, darkness slithered around the old man. Where would this path lead them? Would they find light or only deeper despair? Julia hesitated, heart hammering in her chest. The old man's smile flickered in the dim light, but something about it felt wrong, like it was carved into his face, each crevice a warning. The air thickened with a suffocating tension, every instinct screaming to turn away from the figure that loomed just beyond the tree line. "Mom, please," Ethan whispered, his voice quaking. He glanced back, searching for the shapes creeping ever closer. Their whispering voices echoed through the wood, chilling Julia's bones, reminding her that they were not alone. "Trust me," she forced out, but uncertainty crept in. The shadows crackled, hungry and restless. She shoved Ethan closer to the old man, who remained unnervingly still, eyes wide and glinting in anticipation. "Come to me," the old man crooned, motioning them forward with a crooked finger. His voice was smooth like syrup but carried an undertone that scraped against her mind. As they stepped closer, the forest seemed to pulse. Each step felt like walking on glass, threatening to shatter beneath their weight. The air grew heavier, stinking of moist earth and something sweetly rot. Julia's breath caught in her throat. "Ethan!" she cried out, but her voice seemed swallowed by the thickening gloom. She felt the boy's small hand slip from her grip, a sudden emptiness where warmth had been. Dread washed over her as he moved toward the old man, drawn in like a moth to a flame. "No! Don't!" Julia lunged, but the ground beneath her felt like quicksand. Every effort was met with resistance, as if the universe conspired to keep her from reaching him. Ethan turned back, eyes wide with fear. "Mom, help!" His feet began to move in the old man's direction, his will slipping away like sand through fingers. The whispers rose in a frantic crescendo, drowning out her cries. "You left us," they echoed, maddeningly close. Desperation clawed at Julia's throat. "Get away from him!" she screamed, but the sound barely broke the suffocating silence. In a surge of adrenaline, she pushed against the unseen shackles binding her, tearing herself free from the grip of shadows. She reached for Ethan just as the old man reached out his hand, grasping Ethan's wrist. The moment their skin connected, a flash of pain shot through Julia, a visceral cue that something was dreadfully wrong. Ethan! Her voice was a desperate wail now. The air shivered, rippling like a disturbed pool. For a heartbeat, everything around them fell into stilled silence, as if the world halted to watch the unfolding tragedy. Then, as if sensing the break, the surrounding darkness lunged forward. Vines twisted and climbed up Julia's legs, pulling her back as the old man's laughter erupted around them, a hiss of betrayal that twisted like a knife in her gut. "Don't let them take you!" she screamed, the words carrying everything she couldn't say: her regrets, her fears, the promise she made to protect him. Ethan's eyes darted, caught between the horror of the man in front of him and the terrified plea of his mother. The struggle played out in slow motion, the world around them spinning into chaos. Shadows crept in again, the whispers growing louder. "You abandoned us." As Ethan wrestled against the old man's grip, Julia's heart threatened to shatter. She could feel the pull of the darkness, the grasp of despair tightening around her throat, squeezing until she could barely breathe. "No!" she shrieked, lunging forward with every ounce of strength she had left. Just then, the figure relaxed its grip, revealing a glimmer of something human, as if the old man had not yet completed the transformation into something monstrous. In that fleeting moment of hesitation, she dove for Ethan, removing the boy from the vice-like hold. But the shadows surged forward, ravenous, howling with rage. They tumbled together into a patch of moonlight, the only sanctuary in this hellish forest. Julia could feel the warmth of Ethan's body against hers, but the darkness loomed still, relentless. "Mom, what is happening?" His voice trembled, barely a whisper above the gathering storm. "I don't know. But we can't stop running," Julia said, squeezing him tightly. Panic surged in her chest, but resolve hardened her voice. They sprang to their feet, thrusting themselves back into the bending trees, but as they fled, the shadows seemed to pulse and breathe like a living thing behind them, hungry for their return. And with every step, Julia could hear the whispers again, louder than ever. "You left us. You can't escape." What had they awakened? How deep did this terror go? And regardless of where they ran, would they ever truly be free? The trees closed in behind them, branches stretching like skeletal hands, and Julia knew, somehow, the nightmare was only just beginning. The frigid wind howled through the trees, clawing at Julia's skin like icy fingers. She and Ethan dashed deeper into the forest, the branches scratching and scratching, urging them to slow down, to stop. But she couldn't. They had to escape. "Mom! Where do we go?" Ethan panted, his breath mingling with the mist that clung like a specter around them. "Just keep moving," she urged, fighting against the overwhelming sense of dread. The air felt electric, charged with the whispers growing ever louder, drowning out their frantic footsteps. "They're right behind us. We can't let them catch us." The shadows behind them twisted and swirled, as if forming something more solid. Julia risked a glance over her shoulder, and her stomach dropped. Figures writhed in the darkness, grotesque shapes that twisted and contorted, their faces masked in shadow, a dreadful reflection of the old man, but far more sinister. Another sharp gust of wind sent a shiver through her. The trees seemed to close in, moving in on them as they hurried forward. "Ethan, we need to find a way out of here." Panic ignited her words. Suddenly, the forest floor rose sharply, and they stumbled down a steep incline, nearly falling. When they reached the bottom, they landed in a small clearing. It was quieter here, if only for a moment. "Look!" Ethan pointed breathlessly to a crumbling stone well nestled against the roots of a gnarled oak. "Maybe we can hide in there." Julia hesitated. "I don't know," Ethan, her instincts warned her. This place felt wrong. "Please, Mom." He looked up at her with wide, pleading eyes. The shadows were closing in. That was enough. "Okay." She grabbed Ethan's hand, pulling him toward the well. The opening was dark and damp, the smell of decay wafting up as they crouched inside. As they nestled deep within the stone, Julia pressed her back against the cold, dirty wall. They were hidden for now. She could see Ethan's face, pale and wild in the dim light. "Just breathe," she whispered, shushing the terror that clawed at her own heart. But the whispers returned, echoing outside. "You really thought you could escape?" You can never leave, you are ours. Julia's blood ran cold as her thoughts raced. What did they want from them? Who were they? She felt a thrum of anger against the helplessness. They couldn't give up. Wouldn't he? Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them. The vibrations sent a shudder through the structure of the well. Something was coming. No! Julia whispered fiercely, her eyes widening as dust fell from above. A sickening realization came crashing in. The whispers merged into guttural laughter. The shadows had found them again. The old man's face materialized above the well, half shrouded in darkness. You thought you could hide? His voice was venomous, dripping with malice. There is no escape from us. Ethan squeezed her hand tighter as Julia's heart raced. Panic surged in her chest. We have to move. With every ounce of strength, she dragged Ethan back toward the opening, but as she did, vines erupted around them, wrapping around their legs, yanking them back down as shadows surged upward like a flood. No, no, no! Julia shouted, struggling against their hold. The old man cackled, his face twisting in delight as he beckoned the other figures closer. They were coming. Whatever inhuman force they had stumbled upon was ready to consume them whole. In desperation, Julia looked into Ethan's terrified eyes and saw something shift. A flicker of understanding, a word that had been unsaid. Don't let go, Ethan! She yelled, refusing to let fear win. But as the shadows writhed closer, threatening to engulf them both, she realized the truth. This wasn't a nightmare, it was a reckoning. And it had only just begun. What awaited them beyond the well? Did the shadows hold the key to their survival or demise? The air was thick with tension as Julia clung to Ethan, desperation propelling her forward. The old man's laughter echoed around them, a cruel sound that twisted her stomach. She had to act. This way! She shouted, breaking free from the grip of the vines and racing down the edge of the well, pulling Ethan with her. With every step, the shadows swirled more aggressively, clawing at her heels, whispering her secrets, like a haunting lullaby. A glimmer of movement caught her eye, a path. Over there! Julia pointed to a narrow opening in a thicket that seemed just wide enough for them to slip through. It felt like their only chance. In one fluid motion, she yanked Ethan toward it, her heart pounding furiously. As they navigated through the brambles, thorns caught at their clothes, the very essence of the shadows trailing closely behind, relentless like an angry tide. No! Ethan cried as he felt the shadows grasp at him. Julia felt her heart break at hearing his fear, but she pressed on, urging him faster. Just a bit more, sweetheart. They plunged into the opening, half colliding into a hidden enclave, a small clearing bathed in faint moonlight. Julia took a moment to catch her breath but quickly glanced back, heart racing. The shadows hesitated at the edge of the thicket, like a wall of dark smoke stopping short of their sanctuary. What is this place? Ethan's voice trembled, and Julia glanced around, trying to make sense of their new surroundings. Old stone structures, half buried in the earth, dotted the clearing. Ancient markings crawled along the stones, faint yet tinged with warmth. Suddenly, the whispers began again, but they were different now. Instead of taunting, they seemed pleading. Help us, echoed in the stillness, unraveling the fears that made Julia question her choices. Mom, do you hear that? I do, she whispered back, pulse quickening in her chest. They're trapped just like us. The shadows behind them swarmed, writhing like a living part of a dark curse. She felt an overwhelming surge of compassion. Something tethered her to all those voices, all those lost souls. What can we do? Ethan pressed. The fear in his eyes mirrored her own sense of dread, but beneath it was a flicker of hope. We help them. A fearlessness ignited in her, pushing aside doubt. Together, we can break the chain. As if sensing their intent, the shadows surged forth, shapes solidifying, ghostly figures twisting out of the darkness. Julia's breath almost caught in her throat. The faces of children emerged from the fray, eyes wide and shimmered with sorrow, echoing the same despair she felt when exposed to the darkness. They had been imprisoned too. With Ethan at her side, they took a step closer. We can set you free, she began, unsure if it was even possible. Release us, their voices sang in harmony, a wave of grief crashing against her heart, reviving the long-buried history. As Julia reached for the ancient stones, a pulse of energy thrummed through her fingertips. She felt Ethan beside her, frightened but firm, holding her hand tightly. Together, she whispered, knowing this was the key, the way they could fight back. Chanting the words that began to take shape in her mind, the shadows recoiled, screaming and howling in confusion as their confinement threatened to break. Julia could feel the warmth spread through her, igniting hope in the flickering candle of fear that had suffocated her for too long. "Let us go!" Julia cried, feeling the energy shift, resonating through the clearing. The air hummed, light exploded around the stones. With a final push for freedom, her voice melded with Ethan's, reverberating against the stones, awakening what had been lost. "Be free!" Suddenly, a blinding flash engulfed them, a whirlwind of color spiraling into life as the shadows peeled away, disintegrating into the night. As the brilliant light faded, Julia found herself standing alone next to Ethan, surrounded by stillness. The shadows were gone. A soft glow enveloped the old stones, the air around them lighter somehow. I think it's over," she whispered, gently. Brushing a lock of hair from Ethan's forehead, tears of relief falling freely. "Mom, are we safe?" he asked, his voice small but unwavering. "Yes," she replied, realization washing over her. They had encountered darkness, but they had also discovered remarkable strength in their fear, hope in their love. "We're safe, finally." The whispers had quieted, the darkness liberated. Their family's past had been bound in sorrow, but now it shone with the light of their courage. Julia looked around the clearing one last time, feeling the weight of their journey finally lift. "It's time to go home." Turning to Ethan, she took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next, wholly aware that the true power lay in their togetherness, the bond that could weather any storm. Hand in hand they stepped away from the remnants of the shadows, emerging into the dawn of a new day. As they made their way through the trees, the sunlight broke free, bathing them in warmth and hope, and in that moment, Julia realized that every ending entwined with a beginning, every shadow meeting light. In Crestwood, secrets might linger, but the whispers that filled the night were now triumphant echoes. Their story, heavy with heart, had rewritten the darkness with love's unyielding grace. Now that you've followed Julia and Ethan through this heart-pounding journey, you need to subscribe immediately so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes a difference. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. I want to hear what you think, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support and keep the light of storytelling alive.